Hello and welcome to my workshop. So today we're going to get started on a VW thing. It's going to be a VW thing truck though. So I saw a picture of this online. I think it last sold at a Barrett Jackson auction. It's a very unique vehicle. I'm really getting excited to start working on this. Alright, so let's get to it. This build is starting out like most others. I have 2 scale drawings printed off, and I'm starting to cut MDF into shape. Luckily for me, the VW thing is a brick in shape. Most of the details are the raised portions which run the length of the body. Much like the real one, these raised portions give the flat panels a great amount of strength and rigidity. The body I'm building here is a modified VW thing. This came from a picture of a real one sold at the Barrett Jackson auction. There are quite a few truck conversions out there, but not many this clean and with this look. When planning the build, I realized that the front and most of the interior would be the same as a regular VW thing body. So, from the beginning, I planned on making panels for both models. In order to get the raised portion on the doors, styrene shapes were glued in place on the outside of the panels. I also used Tamiya's scribe tool to cut in where the door panels exist. The corners and top get rounded off a bit with a hand sanding block and a groove cut along the top. This groove gives me a good line to cut to once the styrene is vacuum formed over the panel. The front and rear tapers on the regular VW thing, but on the truck, only the front has a taper. The rear of the truck has been straightened out and the upward angle taken away. At first I thought it took away from the unique look of the thing, but after further thoughts, I realized just how perfect it made the conversion look. Since the rear panels didn't taper, it was easy enough to make the panel as one piece. Once removed and trimmed back, the floor for the bed was glued into place. The bed sits very high compared to a regular pickup, but remember that the engine is still under the rear, so you can only go down so far. Matching this is a blessing for the RC version, since I don't have to worry about hiding the shocks. Both panels are glued into place with a solvent before backing it with CA glue. It may seem like a simple step, but these first glue ups are critical to how well the body will turn out. Careful attention needs to be paid for accuracy and squareness. With a decent section of the rear complete, I now can focus on some of the other panels. My plan is to make as many panels follow the actual seams that VW used to build the vehicle. One of these is the front panel. A few styrene shapes are glued to a regular piece of MDF. In order to get the raised portion where the VW logo will go, a washer is glued down and the center filled in with CA glue. The CA glue sands very well, and with very little work the transition disappears. The hood is the last piece to build for the front. Again, this is a very simple piece with a few strategically placed styrene strips. After vacuum forming the pieces, they are roughly cut from the larger styrene sheet. These pieces are then cut back and sanded down so the front of the thing can be glued together. Since the panels follow the hood line, it was pretty easy to get the front clip glued together. The same care of the back is required along with an occasional sanity check. This is accomplished by taking a step back and viewing the body from several different positions. Your eye will notice small deviations, and this can give you a clue where to start looking for errors in the fabrication. The last piece of the exterior was the rear. This piece consists of two sections. One is the end of the bed, and the other is a door that allows access to the engine. The piece started out as a simple MDF shape, but it has the most complications of all the pieces. The transition between the top and the bottom are cut in with a Tamiya scribe tool. I then had to make a recess area that was angled back to house the license plate. This was accomplished by removing this section with a scroll saw and gluing it back in the recess at an angle. CA glue is used to fill in the hole used for passing the scroll saw blade through. Once the rear is successfully attached, I turn my attention to enhancing the door panel lines. I cut these into the mold, but the main idea is to recess the styrene down a bit so I don't have to cut as deep to get a deep panel line. It's very hard to get these deep lines pulled in, so I need to do both tricks to make it look correct. I thought about making a mold for the windscreen, but decided to just cut one out from flat scraps of styrene. The windscreen is built up from a few pieces of styrene, where the innermost one is cut a little bigger on the inside. This gives a small shelf where the clear plastic can be placed in later. I did add on a few small decorative pieces, but there really isn't much more to it than that. I needed to make a piece which transitions the bed up to where the cab will eventually reside. This is simple enough with another scrap piece of styrene. The top of this piece receives another narrow strip of styrene that matches in height to the door and bed rails. Eventually the cab cap will use this as a support as well as a place for mounting magnets. The cab cap isn't overly complicated, with the biggest problem being the swooping curve along the back. The issue I had is the shape will make the piece very tall. My vacuum forming tank is not very big, so an overly tall piece will cause the vacuum to run out before it has a chance to fully suck down the piece. This is why I had to make the piece in two sections, carpet taped together. The bitch top sander makes quick work of the cab cap. I used to try to get the details as close as possible with a sander, but now I do more finish work by hand or with an oscillating sander. The carpet tapes allow the pieces to be sanded together before they are separated into individual parts. So the next thing to do is put together the two vacuum form pieces. I add in small strips to strengthen up the joint before gluing them together. I wanted to add a small detail on the bottom, but forgot to do that before vacuum forming the piece. It's not a big deal since I can just add this in with some thin styrene shapes. The back window is very large, and I cut the straight pieces out before grinding the corners with a rotary tool. The roof needs to be removable, so I add magnets to the base of the cab cap and the ledge I added earlier. The front has very small magnets, but they really don't have enough holding power. So I took some drive shaft set screws and mounted them into the cab cap. The protruding pin slots into a hole I drilled in the windscreen. This prevents the cab from being bumped off sideways, while the rear magnets hold it all down. With the rear and cab mostly sorted, I turned my attention to the front fenders. These were also created by carpet taping MDF together before cutting the rough shape down on the bandsaw. The benchtop belt sander is used to clean the shape up before finishing off by hand. The fenders received the same styrene shapes to form the raised sections, which cover the rest of the body. I also took some expanded PVC and formed the raised portion which holds the turn signal. I used the same process to make some rear fenders and vacuum form them both. Removing the front fender turned out to be a nightmare, but eventually I was able to get it pulled out. There's always the option of cutting relief cuts and then gluing them back together, which is what I did here. When I made the rear fenders, I made sure to make them extra wide. Since the non-truck version tapers in at the rear, the fenders need to be a little bit wider. I thought it would be very hard to cut the front fenders to match. However, all I needed to do was mark the front and the rear before connecting them with some blue tape. Surprisingly, the first cut was spot on and just needed a little sanding to get perfect. I am super excited to see how well this truck is coming together. I would love to have a real one of these one day. But until then, I'll see you on the rocks.